Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, June 20th, at least as we record this, a late afternoon recording. Construction has stopped for the day, so podcasting has begun. On this episode, we'll discuss several hitters you should consider making moves for in leagues that allow trading. Many of them are really technically buy high players, guys that have exceeded expectations so far, but players whose actual trade value might still lag behind their rest of season value. So we'll dig into a lot of those players in addition to a few mailbag questions as well. How's it going for you on this Monday afternoon?
Good. I am fully clear of the virus, and well, I don't know. It depends on what test you take. PCR, I guess, 90 days or something. But I feel good, and I shaved, so I've got this nice, fresh face look.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, you
Ran
look you look
today. I've got
well.
the running schedule is back on. I've got to get to a half marathon by the end of July. I signed up for the San Francisco one, so.
Well, I've spent enough time looking at the Hal Higdon website where you can get free running training programs that are really
Ah.
good. They're broken down by day for any skill level, right? So you want to do a 5K, like couch to 5K, they've got that. If you're a little more advanced, they got that. They got half marathons. And I know how far
What's
you've been running, so I think you
What's the key
probably
for
have.
that program? How would you describe it sort of quickly?
It's alternating your kind of base distance runs with some tempo runs, and
Yeah.
then training up close. Your long run day once a week gets close to the distance you're going to race at, but actually
Mhm.
comes up about, I think for a half marathon, 13 miles and change.
You can
You get
get
to
to
like
like 8 or
10.
10.
Yeah,
Yeah, mhm.
the program gets you to about 10. Um, but
That's sort of what I've been doing.
you're good to go.
Recently I read a new one it's called Running Slow to Run Fast.
Hmm.
And for that one, they're like, you should be not monitoring your pace, you should be monitoring your heart rate. And that's been very interesting to me coming off of COVID because there are these sort of heart implications. And so that one has been tough for me to integrate because they want me to run at a 140 heart rate. And in order to do like my 5 mile run at 140, I have to run at like a 10-minute pace. So it's really slow.
That's
And
very slow. Yeah.
maybe that's just because I'm coming off of COVID and my heart is just, getting back up to speed. Because earlier it wasn't that slow. But it does, there's actually a time limit to the half marathon when you do it with other people. They
Hmm.
like shut the course down after like 2.5 hours. So I have to do it within sort of 10 minutes per mile, a little bit more than that. I'm a little bit slower than that I can manage. So I'm kind of stuck between these two training mechanisms, but I had been doing really well with the sort of, alternating tempo with like sprint runs and long runs and kind of attacking it that way. And I just gotten to 10 right before I got COVID. I ran a 10, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I feel like I only have like 6 weeks to go. I think I might abandon this run slow to run fast technique if I have to get ready for this half marathon. But kind of an interesting look at running, I think, because we have these different coaching mechanisms, and it's the same thing in baseball. I was just looking at the fact that Anthony Rizzo, had a homer today. He's been a huge part of my labor team being in first place. Um, and I guess he's a buy high for me because he's just doing everything right under the hood. But at 230 batting average, I wasn't sure if we should put him on the list because there's some people who are going to look at that and say, am I really buying high or am I buying low? Like, what's going on with this 230 batting average? Is he really going to do that? Well, I looked under the hood, like he is, I think, in the top 7 or so when it comes to adding barrels year over year. But so are in the top 25, Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, DJ LeMahieu, Gleyber Torres, and Anthony Rizzo. It's 5 guys from one team in the top 25. And they did just change their hitting coach. So that sort of makes me think of this this running phenomenon. Joey Gallo is not playing well. And the Yankees as a group are reaching more. They're chasing more outside of the zone. And we know that hitting coaches have the most effect on swing or don't swing, patience or aggressiveness. And I kind of feel like this new hitting coach has come in and been like, let's be aggressive. Hit strikes hard is their thing. But, if they're reaching it, if they're chasing more than they used to, then they're also being aggressive and swinging hard at non-strikes too, right? So, that his whole, Lawson, he's a great hitting coach. It seems to be working really well, but it's working really well for the 5 guys who were kind of patient before, right? And do have a good sense of balls and strikes, right? And those 5 guys have gotten more aggressive and are barreling more and are having great seasons. I think I would buy a high on any of those guys. But it's not the same approach is really not working for Joey Gallo, who is chasing at pitches outside the zone. It's almost like the run fast, run slow thing where he's just like, nope, no, this is not working for me.
The weird thing, though, with Joey Gallo is the last time he got to 40 home runs in a season, not that he was far from it last year, he had 38 a year ago. But the last time he actually hit 40, he had an O swing percentage that was up above 30%. But right now, he's 10 percentage points above where he's been each of the last 2 seasons in O swing percentage. So there's a big jump in how much he is
easily career high,
those
right?
Pitches.
Yeah.
It's right around the levels he was at in 17 and 18. So it's not unprecedented. And those were good years for Gallo, relatively speaking. Right? He was about a 3-win player in both of those seasons. And
he's
in terms
barreling
of WRC
well
plus,
this
he was
year,
above
but
average.
he's barreling well this year. It's just a cratering of the batting average on balls in play and the worst strikeout rate of his career.
Are they pulling the ball more as a team too? Because I saw Rizzo was up a bit in pull rate. Gallo has pulled the ball more than pretty much
Gallo
he has at
told
any
me
point
he's
this
like,
season.
I can't wait for them to ban the shift. Yeah, let me look at team leaders in pull rate. I wouldn't be surprised if they are near the top here. Let's see. Pull percentage number 1 are the Giants, and then the Twins. The Yankees are 10th. But they have some different players. It's interesting because you do something like this and it's like, you're looking at all the players in one grouping, and Isaiah kind of Falefa is probably not pulling the ball that much.
No, it's not really his game.
Right. So, more detailed look would be like how many of the guys, the sluggers in particular, are up year over year in terms of pull rate.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's the better way to look at it. But as far as Rizzo goes, I think he sort of fits in this group, which is kind of a funny group. It's a lot of players that are oatmeal-y, as we like to say on this show. Many of these players, I don't think anyone we're going to talk about had an April ADP inside the top 100 overall. So to varying degrees, these were underrated or underappreciated players. And we'll start with CJ Cron. $36 earned so far, according to the RotoWire earn calculator. I was running that for 15-team mixed leagues. That's tied for 10th among all players. CJ Cron, top 10 player so far as we sit here on June 20th. Now, I don't think you or I or anyone listening to the show expects that to continue to the point where we're going to be looking at that earned value calculator 3.5 months from now and say, yeah, he did it. He maintained it all year. But for someone who was outside the top 100, kind of in that 110 to 120 range in most drafts, kind of fringe top 10 for the position, you'd probably trade for something that sort of splits the difference cost-wise between what he's earned so far and what people thought he was worth on draft day. And I guess I'm curious to know if you think that's a good idea. Do you think that's an appropriate sort of approach for Cron, factoring in the possibility that maybe the Rockies move on from him?
I mean, that's
and the possibility that with this kind of wobbly combination of plate skills, a 26.9% K rate with a 5.6% walk rate, that's not
it's also
great.
Weird. It's not what he used to do in the past. In the past, he's either made more contact or had more patience. It's kind of a weird combination given what he had been doing. He had been kind of improving his chase percentage, and had been kind of and had paired that with a decent he has a decent natural ability to make contact. He's not like your prototypical slugger, except for you look at that 27% strikeout rate this year and you say, what are you talking about? But for his career, 23% strikeout rate, that's like basically league average, So he's not really, Galloian. He also doesn't pull the ball as much as those guys. And he kind of sprays the ball and he takes advantage of cores. So, generally, I liked him going into the season. I like his production so far. I think that his strikeout rate will come down. His walk rate will come up. And those factors will undo some of the fact that he's been maybe a little bit lucky given that plate approach. I think what you said there about the Rockies moving on, that's the biggest key. And I think that it makes him basically an all or nothing play, right? Like you either trade for him and he remains a Rocky, and then you won and you got what you needed, and you're going to get 275 and 18 more homers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you trade for him and the Rockies trade him, and then and especially if he goes to somewhere where the runs are suppressed, then you may get a 230 version with 12 to 14 homers. I mean, I think that's how far it could go if he's not in Colorado. So in anticipation of that, I kind of looked at the payroll, and he's under contract for $7 million and $7.5 million next year. So they do have him under control. That's a decent salary. They have, as a team, according to Fangraphs, about $130 million payroll next year. So they could hold on to him if they thought they were being competitive, right? But the question then is, do they think they're competitive and they're moving in the right direction? And does the new GM want to start selling in his first year?
There's no guarantee of a trade here because of that last year still remaining. And I just think you're talking about a 32-year-old first baseman. It's not
right.
Really the kind of player teams are going to trade for having that extra year. So he might be in Colorado all year, and you might have people in your league who have him that think he's gonna get traded, and that's gonna keep the price down.
I think it might be 80-20 that he stays. Because I was also then trying to find trade partners. Who are the trade partners? Padres. And
Every
the
time
Padres,
a first baseman comes up, every single time.
Sorry. But I mean, they could use another bat, DH, first base, whatever.
Voigt's waking up.
Huh?
Voigt's been waking up.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not even like somebody with more defensive versatility might be better, like Josh Bell, who's in the last year of his contract.
Yeah.
That might be a better fit. They also have been in love with Nelson Cruz. So I'd say there's a little bit of possibility there, but maybe not much. The Red Sox, Casas is hurt. Dahlbeck is not playing well. The Red Sox are 36-31, 13.5 out of the division lead. And right now, I guess tied for the second wild card.
Yeah, they'd be on that list. Houston.
So
Gurriel's not playing well.
So I would put the Red Sox in for, if it doesn't cost us much, right?
Yeah.
Well, if it doesn't cost you much, why are the Rockies trading him?
Right.
Like if they're just going to get like some A-ball arm, that's like, the 25th best prospect for the Red Sox, and save $7.5 million. $7.5 million is right at that line where you're like, are you saving or are you giving up, a player that's controlled under his cost? So
I don't think he moves. I'm on he doesn't actually get traded side. So I think this ends up being probably the best season of Cron's career based on the groundwork he's laid so far, and trading for him now does.
And somebody might just look at that BABIP and say, oh, he's going to hit 230 from here on out. But I'd be like, I mean, the BABIP in Coors, that's the whole thing.
Yeah, you get that extra juice from those balls in play. I'm going to ask you this just straight up. Did I whiff on Adolis García? All I did was poo-poo the idea that he could repeat what he did last season, because I looked at
Yeah.
the K rate over 30%, the low walk rate, and I
To
said,
bad chase
no way.
rate.
No way. No way he keeps the job all season. There's going to be some point during the year when he strikes out too much. And even though he's a good defender, it's just not going to be enough. The Rangers are going to move on, play Tavares, or somebody else in this system is going to come up and play in the outfield. He's basically doing the exact same thing he did last year. He's cut the K rate a little
bit
bit, still
better.
has the same O swing percentage, putting the ball in the air a little more often, more efficient as a base stealer. He's 11 for 13 as a base stealer. So, yeah, the overall body of work, he was a league average hitter last year at 243, 286, 454. He's 17% better than league average at 253, 294, 474. Just a little better across the board. Are we buying this? Is this just an improvement from a player that got a full season's worth of reps last year and still hasn't picked up even 1,000 plate appearances in his big league career?
He's 29. He has an awful approach at the plate. It's all tools.
I brought him up on the 3-0 show
But
last
he's
week when you were
refined some
gone.
stuff, like he like just think about this what you mentioned about working on the base pass, right?
Right. And I brought him up on the 3-0 show last week as someone that is better than people realize and probably very tradable. Because if you're looking for a versatile outfielder who's a good defender, a guy you can put in center or play in right, depending on who you already have in center field, and you need that extra thump in your lineup, it's not the best possible solution, but it's a solution. And I don't know how committed the Rangers really are to him long term, even though he's not a free agent until after 2026. But this is
Yeah,
the type of profile that gets non-tendered before the player gets to free agency.
usually, yeah. The one thing I would say is that the other possible short center fielders in their system are not playing well. I mean, you have Leotis Tavares who's up, and you could look at that 294, 335, 485 line in AAA and say, "Oh, he's got it together." That's league average in AAA. So you'd still be projecting to be behind, I think, Garcia offensively, and Garcia's decent enough defensively where if you're in Texas, maybe say, hey, let's just play this guy while we got him, and like wait till the next center fielder comes up through our system. Like why trade him away when we're trying to build? And this is the guy who's probably the best center fielder we got right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brian Reynolds and Cedric Mullins are among other actual center fielders that could be moved that bring a lot more ceiling, but there's a handful of contending teams that could use a significant upgrade in that spot. So
Yeah.
I think it just depends on what they can get in the return, even if they don't have a clear cut, ready made replacement. Just given his age, given the
This
profile, and given the long term approach that the league has towards players like Garcia.
what it reminds me of offensively is Javier Baez.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of that in the profile just
Well,
because of the O swing percentages and the raw power, and obviously
like the
there's good
BBK.
speed. Yeah.
Well, it's just interesting because Javier Baez is 29, and we've already seen some bad seasons where you're like, this is what it looks like when it's bad, right? So Adolis Garcia could have a bad Javi Baez season anytime. He could go into it. Like, remember last year what the monthly splits were like?
It was extreme. The league
Oh
kind
my
of figured him out, and
goodness.
he never really adjusted back. But so far, he's figured some things out.
Oh, is it here? First half he had a 270 average. I need to go to the advanced ones. That's first half he was 26% better than league average. In the second half, he was 31% worse than league average. His second half slash line was 211, 256, 370. So I mean, I have an offer in a dynasty league where I have a win now team, and he's on the table for me. I don't want it. I don't want to do it. Like why won't he just go do the same thing he did last year in the second half? And I'm not saying that seasonal splits like that are predictive. I'm just saying he's super flawed, and he showed last year what can happen when people exploit the flaws in his super flawed approach, right?
Yeah. Well, one thing that's been different, I don't know how meaningful this is, but if you look at the splits at Baseball Savant, you look at fastballs, breaking balls, off speed pitches, last season, just one home run against off speed pitches. He's got 5 already so far this
Hmm.
season. He's hitting 278 against off speed stuff, slugging 778. Last year, he hit 186 and slugged 278. Whiff rate's up a little bit, but it just seems like off speed gave him some issues last year. So far this year, that has not been the case. How much can you trust that? How much is that improvement that holds? I think that's more of an open question.
Yeah, I'm furiously trying to look at how he was pitched in the second half last year. And I will get something on that. Yeah, whoo, baby. He started to see some really high slider rates in the second half. In September and October, I've got some 30s and 40s on the slider percentages. And that's got to be a big part of it, where he used to see some fastballs early on and started to see a little bit different. Actually, you could do this on the graphs portion, I believe, at Fangraphs, but I wanted to do it at Brooks, but Brooks Baseball, I don't know. Some of the graphs are just hard to. Have you noticed that?
I haven't spent a lot of time on Brooks the last couple of years. I think ever since Savant really kind of added to its player pages, that's when I kind of cut Brooks out of my life.
It's just they have missing players. Like I think he was missing.
It's not personal.
Yeah, right. Well, I was a little bit wrong. He saw more fastballs actually in the second half. That's a little bit strange. Let me see about sliders. Yeah, he saw more fastballs and sliders. So they just became like a sort of a 2-pitch. They had him rocking back and forth. He must have just seen nothing in the zone because he just has no.
So you're worried about the possibility of the downside Javier Baez stretch for a half season,
Yeah,
which I think is
it's
fair
just
given the
not the
plate
type of
skills.
player that I'm buying.
The thing that he has, though, is excess playing time and the ability to be good or at least average in every single category. And even for
Yeah,
a projected batting average,
power
235
and
the rest of the
speed is
way.
kind of hard to find in the same player.
Yeah, you might get an exceed on the stolen bases the rest of the way. Projections have him 9 to 10 bags. He might end up with 12 to 15. There's no reason why the Rangers can't just keep letting him run if he remains
You might get a
this
210
efficient.
batting average though. So if you are going to get him, then be safe in batting average. Otherwise, I guess.
Sure. All right. So he's part of this potential buy high group. $33 earned so far this season. Tommy Edman, I think, belongs in this conversation as well. I actually just made a trade for him. I'm in a keeper league that I'm trying to win for the very first time this year. And it's an OBP league, which actually hurts Edman a little bit, even though he is walking more than ever. Hard hit rate is up, which maybe is part of the result of the humidor we talked about on the Friday episode. A little more exit velo coming off the bat because of the drier ball. Seems like a possibility at least. And he's atop the order, right? I think one thing we were asked about back during draft season, someone asked us a question about Dylan Carlson and how sticky Dylan Carlson was at the very top of the order. And it turns out not as sticky as some people had hoped. Edman has been up there, so he's piling up runs scored. Helps having Paul Goldschmidt doing what he's doing right now,
Swinging
Arenado's
less,
first half.
walking more.
There's a lot that seems to be
Offense
going
is killing
well.
it.
And he's
Yeah.
eligible at second, short, and in the outfield in leagues too. So he's not only a guy that is going to help you in the category that everyone sort of needs in stolen bases. He does a little bit more than that in most formats. So where are you at on Edman, and how much of this step forward are you buying as sustainable?
It's interesting. Remember we had that conversation. Who are we comparing Edman to?
Whit Merrifield.
No. Somebody was asking, Ozzy Albies. And remember, and we were saying that, Ozzy always hit the ball harder and that was meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is that sometimes you can fetishize a stat. Like, I might do sometimes with pitching plus or barrel rate or whatever, or reach rate, any of the things that I kind of excessively quote here on this. And sometimes you can fetishize it and you can forget about all the other things he does well. and Edman is really good at making contact. And he sprays, except for last year when he was kind of pull heavy, he sprays the ball around and he's fast. So he's going to have a good batting average most seasons. And if you compare it to league average, he's always going to have a good batting average. And he does enough with the barrel rate to hit for enough power that he's not a full zero there. So and then at 27, he's right in the peak range to have the best season of his career, right? So there's all these other things he does well. To say that he has a bad barrel rate, I think probably looks past a lot of these positive things that he does.
I think that's fair, and I think it also, the way you were describing Edman is, I think, part of why I was so adamant that Adolis Garcia didn't belong on my teams, right? Like the K rate. I'm just obsessed. This K rate's too high. Well, look at the underlying numbers. What happens when he hits it? Right. Last season, he was 85th percentile in max exit velo. He was 80th percentile in average exit velo. He was 83rd percentile in sprint speed.
Adolis
Yeah, Adolis. Yeah, he was really good last year. 77th percentile in barrel percentage. All of those things are good. So at what point do you just pick a flaw and get obsessed with it? I think Garcia is a good example of that happening for me. I think Edman is a broader example of that happening to a lot of people, because I seem to remember a lot of tweets and clips and people just being generally out on Edman at the price for a variety of different reasons. And here we are. He's been one of the best hitters in Roto so far.
Yeah.
Of the three we've talked about so far, is he easily the one you like the most just because of the stolen base plus like good OBP or better OBP skills combo?
And he fits a lot of what I like in a hitter. Is just I like discipline, I like contact. And I honestly I would rather, I guess if you're trying to get out of lease, like, he's going to cost less than getting Tommy Edman.
A lot
But I
less,
think
yeah.
I think in this case I would pony up and buy the safer guy. There was a piece of research from Jeff Zimmerman that said that, like, guys that are projected for a 650 OPS lose playing time. And Jeff Zimmerman is the god of playing time, and he's doing really, really well in NFBC this year. And if you look at the projections for Tommy Edman, he's safely clear of that 650. All of his projections are for a 700 OPS or better, and 750. So you have to think of like things probabilistically, right? If somebody's projected for just like a 650 OPS, then they're probably, then half the seasons they don't clear that bar and they lose their playing time, right? That's the sort of Miles Straw level, I think. I said all that without looking at Garcia's, but Garcia's depends on what projection system you look at. He's a little bit closer to 700 when it comes to the bat and the bat X. And that means at least a quarter of the time he's not making the 650 OPS, and he's losing playing time in the second half. So there's that risk you have to bake into this whole thing. You see it differently? You'd rather pay less for Adolis?
No, I think because of my own biases, similar to yours, I think Edman has more things I look for in a consistent and good hitter. And I'm trying to figure out if that's just a flaw in my game or if that's actually the right sort of approach. But I'm with you 100%. Trading for Edman is going to cost you a lot more than trading for Garcia. And you might find that the difference in stolen bases is relatively small. You might find that Garcia hits more home runs than Edman the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm.
The run RBI mix, sure, Edman's going to score more runs. At least Garcia might drive in more runs. So you might be surprised.
That risk of collapse is higher.
It is.
If everything's on the line and you just cannot have a collapse, the risk of collapse is higher.
I would say Garcia makes a lot of sense if you're one of those teams, if you're in a long-term league and you're not necessarily the favorite to win right now, like you're maybe a year or two away, but you're close enough, the league's close enough, you're saying, I got to make a couple of moves. I got to take a chance at this. I don't want to give up great prospects for the future, but I'll give a little bit of future value.
I'm in fourth. I don't want to give up anything. Yeah.
García makes sense
put a
in
toe in the
that
water
context.
and take a home run swing that doesn't cost me the same. Yeah, because if you are in that league and you're trying to get Edman right now, it will cost you a nice young player or two.
It cost me MJ Melendez and a mid-round draft pick. So cheap MJ Melendez for 4 to 5 years for basically unkeepable Tommy Edman. That was the cost of trying to win a title this year.
Yeah, and
We'll
Garcia
see.
probably a lesser prospect.
Yep, 100%. Dansby
Mm.
Swanson popping up on this kind of buy high list. Where's the extra level coming from?
Isn't it
Value wise,
amazing? But isn't it
yeah.
amazing? Because wasn't he on like a sell? Wasn't he on like a buy low list at some point this season?
Ben, I mean, part of what's driven the roto value so much, he already has a career high in stolen bases. He's got 11 steals.
Yeah, he had 216 in the first month.
Yeah. So as that whole lineup has heated up, Dansby Swanson has heated up too. Probably just a better player than people have given him credit for a few years, self included. You look at the red ink is where you want it to be. Barrel rate up in the 77th
How
percentile
would
so
you
far this
predict that
season.
he would steal more bases this year? He stole 10, 10, 5. 5 is the shortened season, so let's call that 15, 9, and now he's got 11 before the All-Star break, before the halfway mark. Let's say that because the All-Star break is in a weird time this year.
Yeah, if there were any indications of it being there, I missed them. I mean, I'm looking like sprint speed. Was that part of it? Do you think there was something with sprint speed that would have told us he was in the 82nd percentile in sprint speed last year, 90th percentile back in 2020, and 88th percentile in 2019? So consistently, a well above average runner.
But he got caught sometimes. I mean, he's not like he wasn't getting 10 stolen bases in 11 attempts. It was 10 out of 14, 10 out of 15,
Yeah,
9 out of 12 last year. I mean, he gets caught
51,
sometimes.
51 for 68 for his career, and that's with an 11 for 13 kind of helping the cause so far this year. I don't see anything in the profile that would have led
I
me
guess
to
he's
believe he was
fast.
going to do
He's
more.
fast. He's fast.
But he's been fast for enough years
Right.
where you could look
right.
at like that's where I would have talked myself out of it. I would have said maybe he's a really safe bet to get the 8 to 10 bags he's projected for, safer
But
than
not
most because of the
20 or
speed.
25 or whatever. Yeah.
But why would he run more? I guess the 363 OBP, he's getting on base more. So you get on base more, you have more chances just by that. But I didn't necessarily think he was going to get on base more. I kind of thought we knew who Dansby Swanson was as a
And
player, and he's doing this at the exact right time.
That might be the biggest part of his line that seems collapsible, right? Because he's got this 390 batting average on balls in play and this 363 OBP, career lifetime 323 OBP, right? That's where you're like, okay, he is stealing bases at a good clip. There's a big part of his value is in that. What happens if he starts getting on base at a 310 clip going forward?
I mean, I guess the thing with Dansby though is that he's walked 9% of the time for his whole career. He's at 9.2% right now. He's usually within 1% of point of that every single year. There's a lot of consistency in that part of his game. Is there something different he's doing with the batted balls that's causing this overall surge in production? I mean, that's the average is a career best for a full season, air quotes, because we don't have a full season yet. At 294, he hit 302 when he came up for the first time in 2016 over 38 games. But we've seen some low average seasons from Dansby.
Is he why you asked if the xStats had been fixed yet?
I think we had a specific question about xStats too.
Oh, okay.
But
I don't think they
would
have been
apply.
fixed, but it's pretty amazing because he's got a 294 average and he's got a 283 XBA. And in fact, I wouldn't necessarily look at those a lot because I would say that too many people would have too much of a negative, right? Because the ball is deader. And so xStats would say, oh, everyone should be better than they are right now. Well, that's the ball. But I actually find that surprisingly close, right? 11 points of batting average with a deader ball. So, he's hitting the ball harder than, 46% hard hit rate. So he's hitting the ball hard a lot. He's found a good launch angle when it comes to up down, and he's pulling it less than he ever has. So I think there's something there where he's got what they say out here is he's got the magic wandu going. He's finding where to place him.
To use a technical term.
Yeah, right. So if you give him the best projected batting average on balls in play going forward, that's 323 from Zips. You could probably give him like a 330 OBP going forward. And then maybe you could give him 9 more steals. So it would be on the higher end of his projected OBP and projected steals. So you're looking at somebody who's going to end the season with like a 280 batting average, 22 to 23, 20 to 24 homers, and 20 steals. I think this is more one you bank than you actually try and trade for.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I think there's actually good reason to go after him. Part of that's just Atlanta's offense being, even without Ozzy Albies, still being a well above average offense. Like, you're going to get those great counting stats as well. And it just seems like enough has changed in that approach where, and I mean, the green lights, if they're going to let him keep running, he's going to get 20 steals. He might not get to 25, but he's going to get to 20. So you're just talking about 8 to 10 more bags between now and the end of the season. Great run production, an average that shouldn't hurt you, and probably more power than we're accustomed to with that increase in hard hit rate. So I think this is one where it's more like an Edman for me, where I'm saying, yeah, it's going to cost me more than it ever would have cost me to trade for Dansby Swanson, but this set of circumstances ticks enough boxes to where it makes sense.
In a redraft situation, I could see doing different things than in a keeper situation, because in a keeper situation, let's say you don't have a good shortstop or you need another middle infielder. Swanson seems like he's very safe. He's in his middle of his career and so on. And the names I'm about to say are not available, right? O'Neill Cruz and Jeremy Pena. Those guys are not available in keeper leagues. Right? They're just like, their owners are super excited. They finally, they cashed in. They got a young shortstop with power and speed. They're super into it. But in a redraft scenario, like, you might be heading into a situation now where you can fab O'Neill Cruz because he just came up, and you could just spend money instead of trying to trade for it. You might be in a situation in a 10 or 12 team league where Jeremy Payne has been dropped in a redraft league because he was hurt and maybe someone had an IL crunch. So, those two names, I think, can do the same thing as Swanson, minus a little bit here or there, but also at no cost, potentially, in certain leagues. So those are the only two names that kind of keep me from being like, yeah, go get Swanson, because I also just see Swanson. We were talking about this with Edman and Adolis. Those guys can be impact players. Swanson's more across the board. So are you fixing a need, or are you just trying to get a good player? A lot of times what we find when we have questions, like we have a question coming today in the mailbag where it's like, I have a need. Like, what's the need that Swanson is going to fix for you? Batting average, maybe?
I think what it comes back to is if you're looking at a typical team that has a middle infielder or a shortstop that's producing less than Dansby has so far and less than we expect him to going forward, he's the kind of guy you can easily put in as an upgrade. And you can say, I'm going to get 15 more runs and I'm going to get 12 more RBIs and 5 more steals than I was. And you look and you can kind of go category by category and say, wow, those categories are all really close. And you can pretty easily see there are 6 or 8 or even 10 standing points to be gained with this player. And it's all coming from a couple different places. That sort of balance, I think, is good.
Maybe the lesson today is, like, don't fetishize any one category, right? Don't fetishize any one stat. Don't fetishize any one category, right? It's like,
yeah.
Swanson's going to be across the board, and he's going to be across the board better than Pena and Cruz.
Well, and I think there's some players that don't run that make even more sense to trade for as part of this conversation. So let's take a look at a few of these names real quick. Josh Bell, who's been a $26 player so far. Ty France is probably in a similar range in terms of overall expectations, and expecting bags from those two guys. Brandon Drury, who came out of really nowhere. His ADP in April was on the list outside the top 1,000. He was not even being thought of at that point. Jock Peterson, not really going to steal many bases, but getting to a ton of power. And then Charlie Blackmon is the rare player where if you're just trying to find someone that plays a lot, has good counting stats, and actually will help you in batting average with a high level of confidence, like, Charlie
especially in
Blacken's
keeper
that
leagues.
guy.
He
Oh,
is you
costs nothing.
nothing. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like just free. So all of those guys have been $20+ players so far, and maybe Jock Peterson would cost a little bit more than you'd expect in a trade. But I don't see any of those names and expect to have to overpay to get those guys. And I think they could continue to exceed expectations.
Yeah, without the Rockies, man, you'd call the Dodgers. I mean, I know the Dodgers are looking for a right-hander, but they're playing Eddie Alvarez and being like, that's the solution for Mookie Betts being out. If I were the Rockies, I'd be calling them and saying, hey, Blackmon is a free agent at the end of the season. He's not going to be around for our next good team. I know he's been, a big part of the Rockies, but if he could get us a prospect on the way out, I think he'd be happy to go play for a good team. So, anyway, I like my favorite out of all those names, other than Blackmon, who's super cheap in keeper leagues. I think in redraft leagues, he might it might be interesting. People might not want to trade him because that Coors bounce of just the fact that he offers a good batting average. Josh Bell is, to me, my favorite, I think, in both keeper and redraft leagues, because I believe there's more power in there than he's got right now. And I just love the contact he's making. And I could see with the weather warming as it is, he make it a little bit more, he get a little bit more out of his barrels and have a better. I know that the Bat X does not like his power going forward. But I've also seen this is a guy who's had better barrel rates in his past. And I just love the contact rate. So it's a guy who's, I think, will hit 280 with somewhere between, 13 and, 17 more homers the rest of the way. Could be really, really valuable because it's going to come with that nice batting average. So I think of those names that you mentioned, Bell is one of my favorites to go try and go get. It's supposed to switch hitter too. So you're not as likely to lose those plate appearances here and there when it comes to platooning.
What do you make of Jurickson Profar? Because he does run a little bit and continues to play a ton, making another run at a 2010 season. Did it back in 2018 and was really on a similar pace, probably with even a little bit more speed in the shortened season in 2020 as well. Power just disappeared a season ago. What am I missing with Profar? Because our buddy Nando DeFino has been pretty consistently on Profar for the better part of the last 4 years, and I've tried to knock it down at every single opportunity, and right now I just look wrong.
He does. I mean, speaking of fetishizing stats, he does the two things that we love the best on this podcast. He, in the year over year, has improved his rate at swinging at balls and his barrel rate in the top 30 of the league. So he's in the top 30 when it comes to improving those two facets of his game. And it's kind of amazing to me that someone who has been really bad at those things in the past can make a little bit of improvement in those facets, and this is what you get out of it. So I do think that some of that has gone away. In fact, I'm looking now, and he's chasing more than he did at the early part of the season. But he's still kind of, I would say, 5 tools, but none of them are plus.
It's just like the
It's like
strange
5
thing.
okay tools, right?
Where's the batting average for a guy that controls the strike zone this well? And it isn't. I can't figure out why we're getting averages in the 230, 240 range from him. That's weird from the projections, from the results. I mean, he's 227 a year ago, 218 back in 2019 with Oakland, 20 homers, 9 steals. I mean, so that was fine. Played enough. Counting stats weren't bad. Why isn't he hitting for average with this approach?
Yeah. Because he has the 5 tools, but none of them are great. I mean, it's
Hmm.
it's a 5% barrel rate. It's it's above average technically, but it's not necessarily for a regular. That would be a kind of a poor barrel rate for a regular. And yes, he 16% strikeout rate. That is above average. The 12% walk rate is above average. The contact rate is above average. Everything's above average, but not great. And I think that sort of, and then then you add these pulling the ball more than he's ever pulled the ball before, and I think that he's just become a little bit more defendable, and especially from the left side when he can be shifted more often, and he's just not a great player. But this is the kind of player that I love to get in mono leagues.
Yeah.
Because they play a lot, they give you a lot of here and here and here, and nobody seems to love them because they don't pop, and they may not even show up as the number one guy on the depth chart, but you just know they're going to get to like 500 plate appearances over the course of the season. If you could have given me Profar, I don't know what he went for in labor, but if you could give me Profar for $3 to $5, I would have bought him. He would have been on my team if I had an NL labor team.
Yeah, I think it's more like $7 to $8 in, but 13 to 15 out. And in a deep league like that, I agree with you. Though I tend to shy away from players like this in mixed formats, especially the more shallow 12 and 14 team leagues. Get a question that kind of relates to a lot of this. This came in from Ari. Ari was top 3 in a dynasty league and was just wondering how much is too much to pay for steals. I lead the league across the board in runs, homers, and RBIs, second in OBP, but middle of the pack in steals and slowly dropping. I know that's where I can make up the most ground, but I don't want to give up so much for someone who won't play much or who might hurt my other 4 categories. Earlier this year, I was offered Jorge Mateo for Keibert Ruiz, and a prospect that seemed like a lot to give up for someone who'd hurt my other categories and probably wouldn't play that much. So thoughts, and this again came from Ari, which kind of leads me to a couple players that made the rundown and didn't get talked about yet. I think the sweet spot here is not quite Jorge Mateo, whose limitations as a big league player are not hard to spot when you look at his profile. Like you can see it. And then you see the projection where it's like, I think most projection systems have a 270 OBP rest of the way. So tooled up
Not
for
even,
sure.
dude.
Not even 270.
Under. Yeah.
With a high K rate and a low walk rate, it's
Yeah.
very easy to just say, yeah, those speeds are there. The steals are there for now. Those steals are there for now.
But what happens when the playing time dries up?
They're probably not there tomorrow. I think this is where someone like John Birdie comes in instead, because the key to Ari's team for me is that he's already doing well in those other categories. If you're doing really well in runs and homers and RBIs, and you're second in OBP, you can afford a player who's a little
Zero
bit more of a
power
one
kind of
category
guy.
player.
Yeah.
And Birdie's playing enough. He started 21 of the last 23 games since coming off the IL in late May.
There's some injury stuff going on in Miami that's contributing to that, but I do think that he's the kind of player that there's going to always be something injury wise going on, right?
Yeah, he's versatile enough. He's going to play somewhere most days. So I think because of players like Birdie, I would at least try to get someone like that first, because I think Birdie's baseline skills are a little more stable than someone like Mateo's. I don't think you're necessarily giving up a great long-term prospect. This is a single catcher league. I don't know if I'm afraid to give up Keibert Ruiz for Birdie or some kind of deal like that where Ruiz is the main player if it's a single catcher league.
I don't know if I'm giving up Ruiz. Yeah, single catcher in a single catcher 12-team league. I did give up Melendez. In just as a comparison, I gave up Melendez for Rhys Hoskins.
Yeah, I mean that's just what it takes
like
to get
power.
good players.
Yeah. And Ruiz is not showing the barrel rate or max EV that you would consider, good for raw power reasons, right? So we've now got, in Ruiz's case, we've got 260 batted balls over his career and a 3% barrel rate. So you're talking about a guy who is probably going to give you mostly batting average, and he's not really stealing that often. Okay, you got me. I can't do it for Jorge Mateo since I'm like, I don't think he's a good player.
There are way too many paths
Red
to
flags.
Mateo just being a 250 plate appearance guy most years in the future, or even some like Andres Jimenez, right? If you're going to give up young talent that you really like, get some young talent back. Now, Jimenez might not be 20 steals the rest of the way, but he might be 10 to 12 the rest of the way. And it depends on how close you really are in the category. 10 to 12 over a possible 0 might be enough to move you up a few standings points, and you've helped possibly solve some of your speed problem for the future. That would be another situation where I'm more inclined to give up a significant prospect as opposed to Birdie. To me is still more of a rental, right? If it's Birdie plus something for Ruiz, I'm fine giving up Ruiz in that
get
circumstance.
Another prospect, like a lesser prospect back or something.
Right. I wouldn't do it necessarily straight up. So I think you do have to accept the fact that steals in particular are going to be relatively pricey in season.
Yeah.
Because the whole league needs them.
Yeah, rest of season projections for steals by the Bad X. Jorge Mateo is one of 10 players projected for 15 steals going forward. So if you really need 15 steals, Edman's at 14. We've just talked about how expensive Edman would be. I think if you could get Edman, then do it. But this person says, like, how much am I, going to pay for it? He's talking about Jorge Mateo. I think Birdie's a good name. What do you think of Miles Straw? Because he is one of the 10 as well.
Straw, to me, for now, you're playing the short game because the limitations for him as a hitter are a problem 2 and 3 years down the road, playing time wise. But he's a great defender in center field. He gets on base enough to be good for the Guardians in that regard.
It's like Enciarte, right? Like, he's not going to get a free agent contract.
It's a fast peak sort of player.
Yeah.
But that can work for right now as well. So I think I would be willing to trade for Straw despite his flaws. A lot of stars on this list. It's hard to trade for Trey Turner and Jose.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, let's not even discuss Starling Marte, right? Like,
in a couple of my leagues, I made some really aggressive trades in May because I had a shot at Ramirez. I had a shot at Starling Marte, and I thought I got to get these guys now, even if I have to overpay a little, because if someone else gets them, there's not really anybody else out there I can get. What do you do with Whit Merrifield right now? He's come up a couple times in this show. Like once a month, we talk about Whit Merrifield.
I think you put him in the Birdie. I think he's uncomfortably close to Birdie and Straw. You don't trade for Whit Merrifield and say, I've got a steals anchor for 3-4 years, so I can give up 2 really good prospects, and this guy is going to play for me, and he's a steals anchor. I think he's uncomfortably close to the Straw Birdie. This might only be a rental for a couple of years. How about this for a name that has the potential to be a guy that you're buying high? You might be like just installing him as a steals threat in your lineup if you believe in him. Andres Jimenez.
Yeah, I think he fits. I think he makes sense because
that's a little bit more like
I'm still getting something good.
A middle infielder that I think is going to play every day, have some power and some speed. I mean, I like some of the stuff he's doing. He definitely improved the barrel rate. That's good. He does not have a great chase rate. And the contact rate seems soft. You know what I mean? Like, he had good contact rates in the minors, but they've just been climbing and climbing. I just wonder if he's going to strike out 25% of the time going forward, swing at 40% of the balls he sees. What's he going to be as a hitter? Is he going to be more like a 230 hitter? And is he the future shortstop for the Guardians, or is he going to float around? Is he just as flawed as Rosario, and we just haven't, he's just playing better than Rosario right now?
40% better than league average so far.
Yeah. I could see if you really wanted to make a move where you're like, I'm going to buy a guy that I think can be an anchor for me, then maybe Jimenez is that. But I'm not sure that Whit Merrifield is that. I think he fits in the Straw and Birdie kind of a guy I'm buying now for steals that hopefully doesn't cost that much.
Here's a rolling graph for you if you happen to be watching on YouTube. Whit Merrifield's rolling 15-game WOBA If you look here in the
Emphasis on the
2022 section,
whoa.
emphasis on the woe. We saw the very worst of Whit Merrifield, a 3-year low back in the first part of the season, but he's at least back close to a acceptable level. I'm not out here trying to defend Whit
No, but let's show
Merrifield.
it again because I think it's very interesting because we were talking to our colleague John Legesa about the sort of bands, right? And the bands of normalcy. And if you look at he got back to a peak, right? This year, even he got hot again. He got back to a peak. The peak wasn't as good as his peaks in the past.
Right.
And he had a nadir this year. The nadir was much worse than it was in the past. So I just see the whole chart sort of going down and to the right, where his good streaks are not as good as his good streaks used to be, and his bad streaks are worse than they used to be.
I agree with that completely. But he is the type of flawed player that if you're just playing that short-term speed game, I'm willing to try to just squeeze a good second half out of what looks like a player who's clearly just not going to be the guy that he was for the better part of the last 4 years.
If you're trying to get Tommy Edman stats but not pay Tommy Edman price, I can see getting Whit Merrifield.
I mean, but you might get 80% of everything else Tommy Edman does, maybe, and match him in speed. I think that's possible. Bags come in bunches for guys like Whit Merrifield.
Yeah. I mean, it's all the thing that's so hard about having this podcast, like talking about these things in the podcast, is either you get someone to give you like a very specific thing, and then everyone's sort of like, oh, well, that's not what I'm looking at in my league, so I don't care. Like nobody cares about your fantasy league. So you have this thing where like either you get something that's super specific and you speak directly to it. Keibert Ruiz for Jorge Mateo. No, we don't like it, right? Or then you start to try and talk about things in generalities so you can get more people interested in it. And then the generalities, are guesses. So like, would I trade Keibert Ruiz for Whit Merrifield? Yes, we've already established that I would trade Keibert Ruiz in a one catcher league for John Birdie. So yes, I would trade Keibert Ruiz for Whit Merrifield. Yes.
We got one more question here, and I think this also sort of ties into some of the things we've talked about throughout the episode. This one came in from Matt. Just a question about Will Smith, the Dodgers catcher, and thinking about trading him in an 8-team dynasty league because he's under eight, like a snowman.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 less than 10. I don't know how else to clarify it. 8-team dynasty league. Because Will Smith is underperforming his xStats right now, and his xStats still look really good. So, just a general question about long-term concerns about maybe Will Smith having.
No, I love him.
Or what do you make of him? I was just
looking to try and maybe buy him even in a 12-team league with one catcher. I usually just punt the position or just pick up whoever. And I have Grandal, like I don't need him, but I was trying to convince myself that I could trade for him and I could get him. Because I think either maybe not this year, but like one of the next 3 years, he's going to be the best offensive catcher in the league. Just look at the combination of walk, strikeout, chase, barrel. It's beautiful. Everything is beautiful. The only thing that's not beautiful is the actual results on the field so far, which are decent, for a catcher. I think he's still, giving you top 10 value.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned chase rate, 97th percentile there, barrel rate, 82nd percentile. It looks really good on the surface, and playing time wise, I think they're messing with him less now than they used to. It looks like he's tracking toward a pretty significant number of plate appearances this year as well. So plenty of opportunities to rebound.
Austin Barnes taking playing time from him.
Yeah, so I think that's the other thing that's working in Will Smith's favor as well. So he'd be definitely on the list of, I think he's more like a traditional sort of buy low where you read a column that has buy lows in it,
which might actually be really hard in today's fantasy baseball environment. You know what I mean? Like if your league mate is listening to this podcast, it's going to be hard.
If your league mate looks at Baseball Savant, listens to podcasts, this one or probably other ones, that most likely that person is hearing the hold or go get Will Smith.
I know, and that actually I think is an interesting thing to end on maybe is to writ large is this, everyone has got so much information now in fantasy baseball that either you can have your own model, which that's how I use Pitching Plus, and Stuff Plus to try and get ahead of other players and identify pitchers faster. And so then you have to sort of pay for those models and pay for those projections so that you have something that somebody else hadn't paid for, or sometimes you have to go with your gut, like the listener that was saying that you thought that we were wrong about Brian Reynolds. He turned it around in almost all facets of the game, other than swing strike rate. He's kind of been who he was, and if you looked at Brian Reynolds through the lens of the sort of stats that we look at here, you would have said he's not a buy low. I think that's sort of what our conclusion was. We weren't sure he was a buy low.
Yeah.
So sometimes the it's a kind of a weird thing that sometimes the thing that can separate you in baseball is to go with your gut.
Just seeing the Pirates put an Allen wrench on Caleb Killian tonight.
That one, the model got right.
I fought the model in this case, and the model won. It's only an NL only league. I think it's the only league where I had him active. So NL labor, but I'm trying to make a comeback there. And I don't need.
Well, he had that 2-star week. I did sort of look at him and be like, maybe.
He got in last minute because someone on that team, like Zach Thompson, went on the IL. And I was like, all right, I'll use Killian, and
he chucked and ducked.
I think an Allen wrench is a great way to describe a 7, just as a snowman's a great way to describe an 8. On that note,
tell me that O'Neal Cruz had something to do with it, please.
Yeah, he doubled. He's got a hard hit ball. He's got a fire emoji in the box score. Love those modern box scores over at Baseball Savant. If you got a question for a future episode, you can send those our way. ratesandbarrels@theathletic.com is the email. Yeah, I'm a little behind on emails again. It's June. Of course I'm behind on emails. Why wouldn't I be? But I'm not moving next month, so maybe I'll make up some ground here in the next few weeks. On Twitter, he's at Saris. I'm at Derek Van Riper. You can also get a subscription to The Athletic for $1 a month for the first 6 months at theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you later this week.
Thanks for listening.